I can't really comment on the SAA, which routes they are, because I don't really know about it. But I know that we have to rationalize routes as well in SA Express, because there are some routes that are just not making sense, because it's just not financially viable for us. But then, does it mean that we don't have an aircraft on that route? So we've got to make that kind of decision. Look, there's no attempts to privatize SA Express. It's not been a discussion. I think it plays too big a role in the development of new cadets. It's actually the training ground for aviation players within the larger scale. I also think that it does connect small towns, and I think it's very important. It's where SAA won't go necessarily. SA Express could go. But also just remember that airlines belonging to the state across the world, they are highly subsidized by the state. And I mean, and we would say, under the strained fiscus that we have, that we are also highly subsidizing our airlines. I believe that we actually, the answer to all of it lies in how we bring in, how we rationalize the three companies, and how we bring in a 25% shareholder to help us with both management as well as on finances.
Okay. Thank you, Chairperson. Perhaps encouraging is the possibility of a private equity investment of 25%, if I understand it correctly, in terms of the holding company. Because at the current state of ownership in terms of the planes, Alf Lees, my colleague in the DA, informs me that South African Airways only owns 9 out of the 50 aircraft that's currently in the air. And then in terms of SA Express that we're dealing with today, I believe that most of the planes are leased from an Angola company, or it's leased from you lease the planes. How many planes do you own and how many planes do you lease in SA Express?
Thank you for the question, Honourable Member. We currently have 20 aircraft. Out of the 23 are owned by South African Express. There's another aircraft that we own which has been written off because it's gone beyond the state of economic repair, and then the rest of the aircraft are leased. They are leased from various leasing companies.
Okay, fine. Chairperson, yes, this is just to bring us in context with the problem that we have, and then perhaps to go into my specialized area, which I was mandated for, because I don't think we need to take over the role of the Portfolio Committee of Public Enterprises. But certainly it is of great concern that the asset base is not very strong and that we're dependent on the lease companies. And also the Minister was very open and honest to say that it's a highly subsidized industry. Now, you know, whether South Africa can still afford it with our low growth and our fiscal constraints, that is another question and a debate for another day. But Chairperson, just linking to the 16 million profit made in terms of course, moving the loans to a longer period, I'd just like to note then that we have then irregular expenditure, if my calculations, and from your annual report, I saw that irregular expenditure, that is where there's non-compliance in terms of legislation, in terms of the Act, the Public Finance Management Act, is to the tune of 38 million rand. I would like to know, do you agree with that figure?
Thank you, Honourable Chair. With your permission, it's about 35 million, not 38.
35. The status of your annual report is a qualified with findings. That has been for the last 4 years. The finding seems to be problematic. And that is also in the 2016 annual report. It's the 4th year that you have a qualified with findings. Do you think that it will improve in 2017? Are we looking towards an unqualified auditor report 2017?
We have moved from a disclaimer to qualified with certain emphasis of matter paragraphs. We obviously working to address all the findings that have been raised by the auditors, and we're certainly working towards getting an unqualified report.
But that does not answer the question.
Yeah.
So we are working towards getting an unqualified report
no,
for this.
No. That's not the answer. Are we going to have an unqualified audit come the end of next month when your report is submitted?
At this point, we don't
No.
know because the audit hasn't been finalized. We are still in the process of finalizing the audit, and as soon as that is done, we will obviously know. It would be preemptive to say we will or we won't.
Okay. Ross?
Yes, Chairperson. Just to then zoom in into irregular expenditure, I think it's a fact that we're not quite sure whether we will reach the unqualified status. The print, as I grow older, I think the print goes smaller every year, Chairperson, and I have to get new glasses, I'm quite sure, because this is very, very small. But are you also, do you have the same problem, Minister? But this
Chair,
is very, very small print.
Chair, maybe they don't want just to read it.
Yeah, perhaps. Chairperson, just in terms of irregular expenditure then, in 2014 the irregular expenditure was 91 million, but it was condoned. By whom was it condoned? Who does condone the irregular expenditure of 91 million? It only states in your report on the very small print by the relevant authority. The relevant authority is that the board. Was it condoned by the board? Was it condoned by the AG, or should it be condoned by Parliament? What is the correct procedure in terms of the law, to your understanding?
Thank you, Honourable Ross. Are we referring to
No,
the
I'm
2014,
yes,
2015, or
yeah, let me
2015?
put it in context. It's
Yeah.
going to be easier for you. 2015 it was 20 million, 16 million you were condoned. And then in 2016 it's 36 million, you say 35 million,
Yes.
and 18 million were condoned. So if it's 36, there's another 18 million that is not condoned. Is that correct?
Okay.
Now, could you just give me, in terms of context, we'll address the condoned areas in a second, but who's the relevant authority that you refer to in your annual statements condoning these irregular expenditure?
Okay. Thank you, Honourable Ross. In terms of the procurement policy that we had in the business at the time, before we reviewed that policy, which the board had reviewed, having identified all these irregular expenditures, the policy allowed a management process, which is a recommendation done by the bid committee, which is an in-house management committee, which would then recommend to the CEO. We've got a detailed breakdown of all the irregular expenditures in accordance with all the contracts that were done, which were within, at the time, within management's delegated authority. So at the time, the relevant authority would have referred in terms of the procurement policy then. However, we have changed that because we were concerned that most of these condonations are done at management level as per recommendation which comes through the bid committee, which is an internal management committee. So as a board, by the time you realize that all these things have been condoned and they are in accordance with the policy that was then provided in the company, we had to immediately, as a concern, make sure that we change that policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. At this point in time, I'd just like to rope in the AG, if I may, in terms of the in-house condonement, whether that was proper or not. Can I have an idea from the AG that's present?
Yeah.
Chair, in terms of the policy, in terms of the delegations, if you look at the PFMA, the accountability sits with the accounting authority, but if that responsibility is delegated to appropriately delegated to the CEO, then obviously we audit in terms of those lines. So if it has been delegated, then we audit in terms of that, and we say it was approved by the authority that was delegated.
Okay, we have to accept that, Chairperson. Chairperson, the first area that is of concern with regards to condoned areas in terms of irregular expenditure, and I'll get to your more detailed statements later, which was encouraging, but let's just talk on your annual report first. the expired contracts to the tune of 7 million were identified, expired contracts. Now, as my colleague, the Honourable Brataseth, always say, don't you have a calendar? Can't you see when the contract is going to be expired? Don't you renew it? Is it what is it incompetence, or is it just laziness within the department that people don't renew a contract that is supposed to be renewed? It is as a result of ineffective contractual management. Yes, the condonement we've spoken about, and then the sanction. There were no disciplinary actions.
Why don't you deal with your first question so that it's not lost? Why are contracts allowed to lapse?
Correct.
Don't you people have calendars?
Honourable Ross, I think it's quite true. People do have calendars, but when the process becomes complex, when you've got multiple contracts, which are at that time were decentralized throughout the organization. We did not have a centralized procurement process. We did not have a centralized contract management process.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, if you decentralized and they procure in Nelspruit, whoever procured, the manager there in Nelspruit, does that manager not have a calendar? Same thing with someone in Bloemfontein. They procured there. Those managers, they have a responsibility. So decentralization is not an issue. It's not a factor, because we are not decentralizing to machines. We are decentralizing to people who procure. And when the contracts end, they just continue. So that cannot be the explanation.
Indeed, Chair, I agree. It's an area of weakness which we have identified in order to overcome the human factor with regards to not keeping focus on when contracts come to lapse, and obviously not just keeping an eye on when they come to lapse, but taking action before they lapse so that the service can be continued. So I agree, it's an area of weakness which we have subsequently put process in place to address that.
Chairperson, then I'll state for the record that it is a massive oversight, very big oversight, and it is really incompetent to see this type of financial management at this level, just for the record. And then with regards to the second part that I've alluded to, with regards to the disciplinary action, it is concerning to note in your report also that there was no disciplinary action. I would like to know why, but then there was stated in the report cannot be traced as to any individual. Are there not individuals responsible for these oversights? Is it who are then doing? Who is then employed, or are you employing people as a collective, or are you dealing with robots? Or if you can't trace an individual that's responsible for this oversight, there were no consequence management, and there were no managerial will to impose consequence management. Am I correct to say this to you, sir?
You are correct, sir. There should have been consequential management, and it was not taken.
Thank you, Chair. That concludes then the expired contracts.
No. Why was action not taken?
Right.
I mean,
Chair, my view is that there should have been action taken. However, if you look at the root cause of the problem, the root cause was that the system was poorly set up. And the view at that time, I believe, was that individuals could not be held liable. As a result, the system was improved in order to allow for stricter consequence management to be taken, taking away, call it the human factor or the incompetency of the individual. However, it is not acceptable.
Chairperson, I find it difficult to make the linkage between the system and disciplinary procedures. I don't think it's that complex, even if the system is not working. So I will not accept this submission at this point in time. I think it's also oversight, and I state for the record it's inappropriate, unacceptable, and there needs to be consequences in this regard. Chairperson, my second issue is then with regards to the procurement process not followed to the tune of 8.8 million. This was regard to the leases of aeroplanes. Now, this is a concerning issue. There were no tender processes, I assume. There were no tender. Was it collective? Was it just the bidding process? Was it just invited bidders? How did you go about to in terms of your lease process if there were no tender process? Time was of the essence. But certainly, if you're going to ground your fleet and you know you have to refleet, it's not an overnight issue for management. You should know that in terms of the quality of the aeroplane, this aeroplane is going to be grounded at some point in time. We expect the regulator to ground it. And then we have to lease another aeroplane. Now, was it done in 2 days' time, or was there not ample time? Could you not embark on the proper process in terms of an open tender process, or did you just embark on unsolicited tender processes?
The figure that the honourable member is referring to is for what you call wet leases. Wet leases, sometimes the word that we use is charter aircraft, where charter aircraft are used to augment where we have a shortage in terms of aircraft available at the time to service our schedule. And in order to do that, we would have a schedule that would require X amount of aircraft to be flying per day, per month, per week. And as common in the aviation industry, you would have some capacity that you want to reserve with charter services, service providers to afford you the aircraft when you need it. We would then go into contracting for what you call ad hoc leases, where you have an agreement with a company that owns the aircraft to either have the aircraft available at demand or to reserve specific capacity for X amount of months for the aircraft. Now, given the type of AOC...
No. You are merely explaining an incorrect process. By explaining it does not make it correct. You see? Because I'm sure that is the explanation you gave to the Auditor General. So if they could not accept it, why should we be settled with that long explanation? Because it does not change anything.
Apologies, Chair. I was trying to get context. Let me get to the...
Well, and then what? So that we can understand. I mean, if there's a finding, we can't understand anything beyond the finding. It's not our job to understand what you did. Our job is to find out why were the lapses allowed to happen. Because if there's a finding, we're not going to change it. That's why we called you here, because there's a negative finding. So you can't come and explain us into understanding the finding that has been made by the AG. So I hear you, but it will not change. It will not change the finding. You see. So we're here on the basis that there is a negative finding, and I would imagine that. But maybe let me allow Ross, because you see this issue around proper management, consequence management. I just get a sense. It's almost as if there's no sense of responsibility. It's almost like it's just some minor little things we do, and not appreciating the gravity of the national responsibility on our shoulders when we're given responsibility to do things for the public.
No, certainly, Chair. I would like to agree with you there, and I'm at idem with you, because it looks like the management is, chartering those planes were just managed ad hoc on a daily basis, which is concerning, in terms of the financial viability of the entity. And if we've reached that stage, I don't know whether there can be confidence in the management now at this level. We've seen the wonderful service delivery at the lower levels, and then we've seen mismanagement at the higher levels. Of great concern, Chairperson. And I'd just like to state now that, of course, we're dealing now with irregular expenditures that has been condoned by, like the AG said, by the relevant authority. So these are condoned. So it was to a certain extent just without proper procedures. And then the last one, Chair, a smaller amount of 2.7 million deficiencies in procurement processes. The old story in terms of the procurement areas where there's no proper open tender processes, unsolicited bidding, whoever you can appoint. It is unacceptable at this level. And those are, Minister, those were the areas that were condoned. That is extremely concerning. It was condoned. In-house condonement, which is unacceptable. And then, Chairperson, if you allow me just to go to the areas where it was not condoned in terms of irregular expenditure. Deficiencies in procurement, 362,000. No motivations were received why these deficiencies took place. Whether this was valid expenses, and I don't think it can be recovered, the specific amount. And then what were the appropriate disciplinary actions once again? And who was responsible in this department at this point in time for the disciplinary process? Can you give me a name? Can you give me a committee? Is the person present?
At the given time, the disciplinary responsibility lied with the CEO. Unfortunately, the CEO of that time has left the business. But according to the irregular policy of the time, it gave the responsibility for disciplinary action to the CEO.
To the CEO.
Fine,
Chairperson,
with your permission, may I just add in? I think what the acting CEO is not saying, insofar as it relates to the irregular expenditure around the charter aircrafts, these wet leases, an employee has been disciplined in that space. And I think the CEO needs to speak about that fact, maybe because this happened in the last 2 months, but it was as a result of all these irregular expenditures that we find in that space. But the second part, again, Chair, from a consequence management point of view, one of the things that we had to do in consultation with our shareholder was to get into a stage where, hence we have an acting CEO, to get into a stage of parting ways with the previous CEO. That for us was key because that's part of introducing introducing new management to be able to get to the bottom of some of these issues that we're experiencing, which are happening at management level. Thank you, Chair.
But how was so? Did the CEO who left, did he deteriorate, or he was just appointed with those deficiencies? Because then it calls into question due diligence having been done when people are appointed. Because it is of no use to now say we had to get rid of that man because he was not delivering, and yet you people appointed him in the first instance.
Jefferson, I can't for a moment accept that you will have this very lean personnel structure at South African Express with only everything revolving around the CEO. Certainly there was a disciplinary committee, certainly there were risk committee, there were internal audit committees, and I would like you to give us more details with regards to responsibility and how your organogram was structured. Because I don't buy that there was now one person responsible for the mess and that person has now left. And in SCOPA we're used to that trend. When committees or entities appear before SCOPA, suddenly the CEO leaves. I think we don't have a good influence on personnel, because when they have to account, they simply leave, and then there's just the excuse the person has left and nobody else is responsible. I cannot buy that for 1 second. You have to give me the names of the disciplinary people serving on the disciplinary committee. I would like to know who was serving on the internal audit committee and what was the position with regards to the risk committee at South African Express.
With regards to the consequential management, if I have to speak to it, there has been various employees that have been that action has been taken against, and I wanted to say for the context that it might not be for the 2015-16 financial year, but with regards to similar findings which have been picked up since I've joined the business. We have suspended a few employees. One of them, the suspension led to a disciplinary committee, which was chaired by Dr. Sam Vilagazi, the Chief Procurement Officer. And the outcome of the discipline was that we dismissed the employee. And the dismissal was related to charter aircraft services as well. There was a few. Okay, I thought you had a follow-up question.
Now, in terms of timeframes, when did you join the organization? Yourself? When did you start?
I was appointed on the 10th of April, 2017.
2017?
Yes,
in the last financial year. And the Chief Procurement Officer? How long have you been with SA Express, sir?
1st October 2016.
1st October 2016. And your financial statements in 2016 was, it's at the 31st of March. Chairperson, so I'd like then to state for the record that before 31st of March, in terms of an organigram, a proper structure in SA Express, it was non-existent, if I'm correct. Or would you like to clarify that for me? Would you like to come with a counter argument with regards to this?
Okay, just a minute, Comrade Minister.
We had, let me say that we probably have had one of the CEOs because I've heard the comment about the CEO, who has one of the few black aviation experts in our country. I think we had real problems with management. Doesn't mean an expert in an area can translate effectively into management. The board brought a proposal to us about a year ago, and we've gone through a discussion about what we need to do. In the process, we negotiated with the CE that because his contract came up for renewal, that we would not renew his contract. The board would not renew his contract. We then got from Denel Aviation the acting CE, so that we had somebody who still had knowledge and experience of aviation, but with better management skills. And so, yes, I must tell you that I've met the executive and the leadership when I arrived, and I appointed the board. And we've had serious problems. I was very pleased with the questions around leasing, for example, because that was a big headache. Consequence management within the company was a problem. I think the company now has one matter has even gone to the Hawks after we've appointed the leadership that's present here today. So it's been quite a complex. We didn't want to lose somebody with aviation skill, but we had to take a decision for bringing somebody in with a different aviation skill, but with a management skill that would be able to manage the airline.
Okay, Chairperson, yes, let us then just recap in terms of condonement. There was massive irregular expenditure, and there were irregular expenditure that were not condoned, which is more serious, and there were no appropriate action in terms of disciplinary steps. But then, since there are now new people employed, a presentation was also added after the annual financial report, which gives us more hope, and I think it makes much more sense, and that is an improvement. Now, this is with regards to development since previous presentations, management of irregular expenditure list summary, which is good, and then conclusion and questions and answers. Now, strengthening of the management oversight. Who produced this document? Did you produce it, sir? Yes. Would you like to quickly give us a recap on the document, so to give us some hope going forward?
Thank you for the opportunity, sir. I will take you through the presentation slide by slide.
Chairperson, I don't know whether you will allow that. I was just asking for a quick summary.
A quick summary.
Just a summary.
Okay.
A 2 minutes lift out the key issues and areas that you want to talk to.
I think the intent behind the document was to link with regards to the findings of the Auditor General in the financial statements, just to give you a view of improvements that have happened in the business since the last time that the business was invited to come and present at SCOPA. And ideally, a few areas has improved. Number one, it's the strengthening of management oversight. With regards to, one of the things we had to do was to, from a segregation of duty perspective, the IT environment and the procurement function were reporting under the Chief Procurement Officer's office. Those roles have been separated to stand on their own, and we also employed subject matter experts to lead those functions. Case in point is also Dr. Sam Vilagasi, who's our Chief Procurement Officer of the site. Hence, we've seen some of the developments that the organization have achieved until now. The other area of improvement was the delegation of authority and responsibility framework with regards to responsibility towards consequential management, which, if you look at our report, it always reflects that the general manager of the function was responsible for the irregular expenditure. But right now we drilled down to the employee who was responsible for specific actions that led to the irregular expenditure. One other key development is what we said, centralization of the procurement environment. Prior to the current status, there was various people within the organization that had access to procure and commit on behalf of the company. And what we've done is we've centralized procurement, number one. Number two, commitment on behalf of the company is now centralized at the CEO level, at the Chief Procurement Officer level, and at the CFO level, where we make sure that whatever commitment has been made on behalf of the company is known and also centralized within our legal and risk management office that is led by Ms. Mochwele. The other area of improvement is with regards to the delegation of authority for condoning of irregular expenditure. At the time, it was lying with the CEO, where management would make recommendations to the CEO for the CEO to approve. That process has been changed. Our regular policy has been updated so that the condoning is only done at board level. The recommendation is done by the CEO. So that increases, obviously, oversight, and it also drives a spirit of preventing irregular expenditure before it happens, as opposed to trying to condone it after the fact. The other area that we looked into was that we identified typical root causes. I think if you look at the presentation, you will see that we've got repeating root causes as a root cause towards the irregular expenditure that has been identified. And our view there was, the concept of a root cause is if you remove that one cause, then the problem will never reoccur in whatever shape, form, or period. So we've identified typical root causes, and those were more linked to the inefficiency in our procurement policy. The environment we operate within does have an aspect of limited service providers, and sometimes you'll find a situation where our policy at the time was saying, send out a quote, obtain 3 quotes before you can award a contract for a service. Sometimes you'll find that we don't get 3 quotes, you only get 1 quote. And when the Auditor General audits us, they audit us against our policy, which says 3 quotes instead of 1. So we had to look at those inefficiencies in how the policy was defined in order to avoid those, matching our policy to our industry that we operate under. Thank you.
Chairperson, I have another 2 questions, and then I would also like to ask if my colleague, Honourable Bratteseth, he would like to go into details with regards to the list of irregular expenditure. If that's, with your permission, is acceptable. Just the 2 questions from me, and then Honourable Bratteseth will deal with this list. Is that correct? Okay, if so. Chairperson, just in terms of management of irregular expenditure, and this is in the documents, aircraft on the ground, unscheduled maintenance. I'd just like to ask you a question. Now, you say you want to align policy with the operational business, but that's just an obvious statement. Of course, you have a policy, and then you have the operation, and you have to align it with operational business to give effect to your policy, which is hopefully will be done now. But you do have a bid committee. That's the first question. Do you have currently now a bid committee? You have all the committees, the risk committee, the internal audit, you have the board. Everything is now functional. Is it correct?
Yes,
But
sir.
then in terms of your scheduled, unscheduled maintenance on aircraft on the ground, I'm just concerned with regards to your operational methodology in terms of maintaining the aircraft, SA Express. And perhaps I'm speaking on behalf of millions of passengers that would like to have some sense of surety with regards to safety, etc. Certainly this is a very important issue. Are you not using as a feeder company South African Airways, who services other international aircraft? Currently, that's my information. But you have a problem in terms of your service department. Is it correct? But you're not using SAA. Is there a standoff between yourself and SAA with regards to maintaining these aircraft, or are you using them?
We have a unique model. We fly aircraft and we maintain it for ourselves. And ideally, from a business model perspective, that requires improvement. Within our technical environment, we do have certified artisans and technicians who are certified to the specific type of aircraft. Now, South African Airways uses the service of South African Airways Technical, which is a standalone business in its regard. However, the difference is the certification of the technicians, which is limited to the type of aircraft. And we are currently operating we are operating two different types of aircraft. They are operating larger aircraft, single aisle aircraft, and also dual aisle aircraft. We are operating what we call regional aircraft, which has got a seat capacity between anything from 30 up to about 70 seats. So the type of aircraft is different, therefore requiring different types of certification for technicians. We do, however, have our own internal technicians, and we have maintenance programs that we apply, which are audited by the Civil Aviation Authority. And I don't think there is an area of concern. The area of concern is with regards to the fleet that we have. And there's been plans that have been rolling from year to year to tire and refleet. Refleeting in terms of improving the rate of availability of our aircraft so that it's available to serve the schedule that we've got. The rate of AOGs is as a result of in lack of a better word, I say the age of the aircraft. Most of the aircraft that we fly are between 20,000 and 30,000 cycles. And that means the aircraft has got about 4 to 7 years left with regards to what we call before they reach their midlife. So for this airline to operate optimally, where you've got a maintenance organization that can support the fleet, we need to refleet. And I think the minister has alluded to that aspect, that refleeting has been a requirement of the business. It still requires to be implemented in order to alleviate the efficiency at which the maintenance is carried out on the aircraft.
Chairperson, can I respond to the question? But there's an admission now that you think there could be improvement in terms of your maintenance program. When can you supply us, perhaps, will you supply the committee then? I think the Honourable Mazzoni has just entered. She's serving on that Public Enterprise Committee. I think this is an important admission that you've made, that there needs to be improvement in terms of your maintenance programs. I accept that there's different technicians for South African Airways, but certainly, as you say, SAA Technical, it's a private. Is it a private firm, or is it part of South African Airways? But nevertheless, you can. Is there not a possibility that you might have you tried to engage with this entity to see that they can perhaps service your aircraft? Is there currently a problem in terms of servicing the aircraft? SA Express.
Let me address the issue
financially, perhaps. We the SCOPA committee would like to just put it in the financial context. Your budget in terms of maintenance, is it proper and functional, and is the aircraft being serviced?
The aircraft is being serviced. The financial challenge with regards to maintenance is the fact that the highest cost is spares that are required for the aircraft. In the business that we operate, the acquisition of the spares, which are high-value items, most of them, needs to be bought as capital items. Because of our capital structure at the moment, we are using cash from operations to fund capital acquisitions. And I think that's the challenge that we need to look at recapitalizing the business to allow us the ability to go and source funding as capital funding to fund those acquisitions in maintenance. If I may just touch on the issue of SAA, there has been engagement led by the shareholder. There has been a view of having a consolidated MRO capability within the state-owned aviation assets, if I can call it that. There has been engagement between South African Airways Technical, South African Express, and also Denel, through Denel Aviation, because Denel Aviation is doing maintenance, repair, and overall on typically military aircraft of different types. And as we speak, there has been a PFMA pre-notification that has been submitted to the shareholder, looking at the opportunity to transfer the maintenance, repair, and overall capability from South African Airways Express into Denel Aviation, so that we become what we call an air operating certificate. We'll focus on flying the aircraft, which is where our expertise should lie, and we allow Denel Aviation, with their expertise in maintenance, repair, and overall, to take over that function, and they give that service to us in order to optimize that. And if I may just, you said if there is a plan, we can provide a plan. The plan will be in two ways. There's a short-term improvement that we've implemented with the help of the OEM and internal members, where we're identifying short-term gains. But the long-term gain will be in the transfer of the complete MRO function to Denel.
Okay. Chairperson, I think that concludes my questions. Just in a closing remark, that we can be concerned with regards to the model not really structured, the future plans as outlined today. I don't think there's clarity still with regards to that. And the massive challenge in terms of financing your fleet and refleeting. I think it's major challenges, and I think we might request for the committee perhaps to appear again before us. This is important issues. It's an important entity. It's important for the economy that we get the finances right, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak to the South African Express.
Thank you very much. Comrade Kekan.
No, thank you, Chair. I'm going to deal with administrative and legal issues first, so that we put them aside. And in that, I'm going to look at the responsibilities of the accounting officer. I think you do have this copy, because this is the Bible that is going to assist us in our engagement. I think you know the responsibilities that is of the accounting officer. And you also know what you are expected to do as an accounting officer if there's a fruitless and wasteful, that is wasteful expenditure. In terms of the section 38(1)(g) of the PFMA, you are supposed to report this immediately to to your authorities. Was that done? Or do you want me to read it properly so that you understand exactly what I'm talking about? It says here, on discovery of any unauthorized, irregular, and fruitless and wasteful expenditure, must immediately report in writing particulars of the expenditure of the relevant treasury, and in the case of irregular expenditure involving the procurement of goods and services, also to relevant, that is tender office. Was that done?
Honorable Member, the process followed at the time to identify and also to look at dealing with irregular expenditure was done only at the end of the financial year by the entity.
All right, so it was not done.
Okay. We are in agreement that it was not done.
It was not done immediately in terms of the regulation.
It says immediately. It does not say at the end. Yes. And the other issue is also on the PFMA, on Section 38, Section C, it says your role as the accounting officer is to prevent the irregular and fruitless. Are you preventing it?
At the present moment, we are, sir. With the strengthened management oversight, we are doing that.
I think we are aware that we are talking about 1516. Yes. And the response that I need, they should relate to 1516, not 1517 or 1519. Can I get a response on 1516? Was this done?
No.
No, sir.
If not, what must we then do? Because in terms of this document, you are responsible. And what must we do? It is very clear that you violated the law. And what then must we do? Should we accept that, no, it did not happen, it's fine, and we must proceed as normal?
I think, sir, it's unacceptable. And maybe reflecting back on the comments of the chair in his opening comments, he did identify that this is a chain of improvement. And the fact that there has been measures put in place by the board, supported by the shareholder, to further improve management oversight in the organization. Let's take that into consideration. To say it was not done in the past, but it's a journey of improvement where new management is in place, and new management is making sure that we prevent and we align ourselves to the tenets of the PFMA. Sir.
Unfortunately, you are not responding. That is to my question. Let's then move. And earlier on, there was a question on going forward. Are we going to get a better audit, that is opinion? And a gentleman there was a bit wishy-washy. Oh, what is the response?
So it is not a wishy-washy answer. I apologize if it came across as such. We don't have sight of an audit opinion as yet because the audit process has not finalized. So I cannot put words into the mouth of the auditors or anyone else to state that we will or we won't.
No. You should say we submitted late. That gives us proper context because in terms of the law, by now the audit process should have been finished. Let's say you submitted late or you say the Auditor General delayed, then that gives us context. But to say it has not yet been concluded, it's almost as if it's an open-ended process. It is not. Did you submit in time or is the Auditor General delaying your financials?
There's no delay from part of the Auditor General. We did have some challenges around finalising the Fs by the 31st of May. They have since been submitted,
right,
and we are working towards the 31st of August deadline.
Right.
Okay.
And that assists us to have context, you see.
The Auditor General indicated, let me start with the 3 repeated findings, that is to you, on the 15-16, that is report. One was on non-current and current assets, the other one on inventory, and the third one was on the taxation effects. Was that corrected?
We have taken the findings that the Auditor General published in their report, and we have worked on solutions to ensure that we comply with their requirements around the carrying value of inventory, around rotables.
No.
So that's
no. I'm being specific, and I need a specific answer. I think the chairperson indicated earlier on. Don't be general. I'm asking you a specific question Please respond to my specific question.
Yes, we have put processes in place to work with the findings of the Auditor General around assets, rotables and consumables, and the deferred tax that relates to those classes of assets.
Now, the Auditor General is saying also on uncurrent and current assets, you did not provide that is information. The question is why?
The issue around the trade receivable on the split between maintenance reserves between short and long term, the asset value was correct. However, there was a dispute around whether there's a portion that is short term and a portion that is long term. Our opinion, and there is a reference in the financials which states specifically that maintenance reserve assets are the subject of levels of estimation. And in our view, given the uncertainty around when a maintenance event will occur, you keep it all as short-term assets. So due to the fact that we have had several issues over the years with the auditors differing on opinions on whether maintenance reserve assets are indeed assets, we worked with the accounting opinion that we obtained from a third party as well, and we sorted out the qualification issues that relate to maintenance reserves as an asset. That was resolved. The issue is around whether it's short-term or long-term. So there was a change in audit approach, and we stick to our opinion, and we are working with the AG for this year to indicate why we believe it is all short-term assets.
Now, I'm interested in your initial statement, not in the rest of what you say. You said in your opening statement there was a dispute. I'm interested in that dispute. Was there a dispute between yourselves and the Auditor General?
Yes, there was.
And how was it resolved?
We sourced an independent opinion from an external audit firm that had derived the accounting treatment.
Who is that external audit firm?
We used KPMG.
KPMG.
Which is KPMG did the initial review of SA Express's accounting policy adoption in 2007. And given their work that they had previously done, we wanted them to assess whether we did comply in terms of IFRS. And it's a checklist against what does IFRS state, how does SACS account, and we reached common ground with the auditors in the next year, in this year, that says maintenance reserve assets are indeed assets.
What was the purpose of that exercise? To second guess that is the report of the Auditor General?
No, it wasn't a second guess. It was, we had always had an accounting policy of capitalizing maintenance reserves to assets. This was never an issue until 2014.
No, I'm talking about the involvement of KPMG.
KPMG was involved in 2007 in setting up the accounting policies way before the Auditor General was involved.
In relation to the dispute.
Okay. Because we couldn't reach common ground in the prior year, and the auditors qualified our financial statements on the basis of us treating maintenance reserves as assets, we agreed together with the Audit and Risk Committee that we would get KPMG to come in and assess whether SACS was indeed accounting correctly in terms of the policy.
A company that you had given business to in the past.
They set up the policy. They understood, they had the context, they had the understanding, and they do 80% of the world's airlines. KPMG audits British Airways, and
yeah, no, we know
so,
they even get money from National Treasury without delivering on their contracts. So we understand them very well.
And we also know that when you had a dispute, you would run to KPMG because KPMG would agree with you.
Certainly at the time we did this, we had no knowledge of any dealings of KPMG between any issues with Treasury and work that was done or not done.
No, I'm not talking about
No,
treasury.
the treasury thing is irrelevant to your case. We're merely talking that don't flag KPMG as if it is an angel from heaven. There are people who are motivated, by the profit motive. The fact that they've done work for you to go and consult them, they are already conflicted. That's why you find what happened yesterday with Deloitte, saying, if we do this job, can we be guaranteed that we'll get future job? So we're just saying, no, it's fine. That's what happened. But we're just saying, as you are relating it to us, we don't think it was a good move to do so. And I mean, what authority does KPMG has over the Auditor General? So, but anyway, that was a decision then taken. It's okay.
In actual fact, Chair, you read my mind, because that was going to be my next question. That it seems as if we have two competing Auditor Generals in the country, KPMG and the Auditor General. If you have a dispute with the Auditor General, you go to this super one, KPMG, and their word is final. That's what you are saying to us and to the country.
No, so what we're saying is that after KPMG had reviewed the way that we were accounting, that we'd been accounting that way consistently, and the auditors then re-looked at their assertion from the prior year and concurred with us that it was indeed an asset, that we had been accounting correctly, but that the classification between short and long term was an issue. It was not to override the auditors.
No, that's fine. No, that's fine. No, that's fine. We hear you. It's just that it creates a precedent that can be very problematic. And I'm surprised that the Auditor General actually acceded to that kind of intervention. I would have imagined that National Treasury would have been the relevant authority to go to, and not some private firm out there, called KPMG. But anyway, it's fine. That's what happened. It's okay.
So if I could just answer the comment about the National Treasury. We did engage with the Department of Treasury, the accountant.
No, that's fine. No, that's okay. I'm just saying the involvement of KPMG, that's the issue. You can do every other thing, but don't take us to these companies.
Chair, just in hindsight, I do take note of the comment, and it's something that we look into.
All right.
You made a commitment that you are working on. That is your next audit opinion. You have a system called AMASIS. Is that system maintained, properly maintained? Let me put it that way.
There has been a challenge with AMASIS in terms of its primary role, which is to track hours on rotables. That is maintained. What we haven't done over the past years is invest in the upgrades to the system, which would make it easier to use. We are now going to be investing in the upgrades. This is a system that's used by Airbus, and we will be redoing user training and making sure that everybody's up to speed with the latest upgrades.
By implication, you are saying to me, no.
We're saying
There is nothing that you have done in terms of maintaining that is this AMASIS, because it is the one that assists you in terms of information.
There has been a lack of investment in the upgrades. In terms of day-to-day maintenance, the system is maintained, but we haven't upgraded on a consistent basis to keep to the latest releases.
Now, why are you then coming to this hearing and confidently indicate to us that your next audit opinion would be better if you have not corrected that is your source of information?
What we have embarked on is a full count of every item in the stores, in all the locations, specifically around consumables and rotables. Those adjustments will be processed on the system. The reason that there was a system issue was that stock adjustments were processed through the general ledger to accurately reflect the carrying value of the inventories and and rotables. However, they were not processed on AMASYS because AMASYS was not designed as an accounting system. It was designed as a spares tracking system.
Yes.
The add-on tracks values. We've now gone and put in a process to ensure that the values that are there are corrected for the values based on the count that was done, and we will keep the two in sync.
Now, when you procure the system, were you not aware of its shortcomings?
There is a module, however, it is not designed as a fixed assets register. I think with the upgrades, there are certain things and certain items of functionality that will bring better value. There's always been an interface. Systems, by their very nature, can't be all things to all disciplines. Its primary responsibility is, as I say, tracking of spares, which is a civil aviation issue, and making sure that hours and cycles and time to expiry is managed properly. The fixed assets portion fits on afterwards, but we are working to make sure that they tie up with the extra process that we have in terms of making sure valuations are correct. So we won't just have the one, we'll have both.
No, I agree with you. You had this amiss, but unfortunately you decided to use the Excel spreadsheet. Now, hence I'm asking, that when you procure, that is this system, because the idea was you procure the system to be in a position to assist you. Now, here's a system. You decide not to use it. You use something else. Hence my question that at the time, were you not aware that there are shortcomings that is in that system?
I think the primary focus of when SABC acquired that system was to track spares. It was not to use it as an asset system. There's been the added functionality that's been built up over time that builds in the asset values, and there's been a process of cleaning up data and making sure that whatever's in there now is reflective of what is on the floor.
Okay. Maybe let me rephrase my question this way. Do you have an asset champion?
We have 2 asset accountants who make sure that the accounting side of assets is done, and then we have moved logistics and the sourcing of inventory and rotables into procurement rather than sitting in technical. So we've divorced and segregated the duties there to ensure that assets are booked in and that the accounting follows through into the asset people.
You see, what confuses you is you don't respond to my question. I'm direct. Do you have an asset champion?
Yes, we do.
That's the question that I want. I don't want this long story. When did you appoint an asset champion?
There's been asset accountants since I've been there.
Are you aware that the Auditor General, in his finding, he said you don't have one, and hence you have these problems?
How do I answer that? We have asset accountants. Whether we agree with auditors or not, and whether they identify them as asset champions, is a matter of interpretation, I guess.
No, but you have indicated earlier on that you don't agree with that is the Auditor General. I'm not going to go into that discussion, because in terms of the finding, that's what the Auditor General is saying. And you seem to be reluctant that no, the Auditor General's finding, unfortunately, they are not binding on you see. I say it.
Chair, through you. Even though this might be a matter of interpretation, but I tend to agree that the function of asset champion it will add value in the following. You've got the user environment, who are the people that we refer to as the maintenance, repair, and overall function. You have logistics function, which is the acquisition function that acquires the spares and controls the spares. And then you've got a finance function. So you've got three players, all with their respective responsibilities. And I think the view by the Auditor General is that you need to roll up one accountability that oversees these three functions in their roles. And in that, I agree, we need to invest in that. I agree.
So where's the problem? This so-called problem of interpretation, how does it arise?
Chair, I was more referring to the understanding that there are asset champions within the finance organization. I was saying the view is it needs to be a rolled-up responsibility that oversees three different functions.
It's fine. I'd heard you very well. I'm saying, so where is this difference of interpretation with the Auditor General?
So I was responding merely to the fact that from a finance perspective, there are dedicated asset people. But
so what is if yours is a finance perspective, what is the perspective of the acting CEO? His is a finance one. What about yours?
Yeah, mine comes from an overarching business view, and that's what I was trying to explain to the honourable member, that you've got three key players.
No, actually, you should explain to your colleague, not to him. It's your colleague who needs that explanation, not Comrade Kika.
Noted, sir.
Because he seems to be contradicting it. That is you. And I take it that he's a member of your team. And before you came here, you met as a team and you made preparations. So that when you give us, that is the response, you give us a response as an entity. You don't give us responses as individuals. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
Yes. And let's get responses from the entity, not from that is individuals who would give us their own opinions that are not in line, that is with the AG's findings. Let's then go to sundry income. The AG noted that the sufficient evidence for sundry income did not exist. Sundry income of 115, that is 0.8 million, is reflected as sundry income in note 7, that is page 91 of the annual report. Why were the documents not kept, that is for audit purposes?
So these relate to maintenance reserve assets again, that when the entity acquired the aircraft, maintenance reserves follow the aircraft. And when these aircraft were acquired, the lessor never submitted what those opening balances of maintenance reserves that came across. As a consequence of that, there was no source documentation to allow the entity to book the entry in that particular year. And when we went through the process of confirming maintenance reserve balances with the lessors, this was brought to light. However, we disclosed them in the 2014-15 year as the comparative, and there wasn't the ability to go back to the original paperwork that said this is when it belongs. So we adjusted it in the prior year.
What is inability to go to the original paperwork?
So when the aircraft were delivered and we acquired those aircraft, the maintenance reserves that were attached to them, we did, the finance function and the aircraft acquisition team did not have the original paperwork that was supplied back in whenever those aircraft were acquired.
No. What I'm trying to find out, didn't have because you lost them, or didn't have because the person from whom you leased did not give you those documents?
My understanding was a lack of provision of the documents from the lessor, and that was then, there'd been a number of novations from one company to the next to the next. These aircraft had started off at GCAS, then went to Computer Share, and then moved on. and it was in those transitions that that paperwork was not forthcoming.
Internally, we are supposed to have somebody who is responsible for that transaction. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Yes. And what happened to this person?
That person hasn't been at SA Express for about 5 years.
Come again?
He had left the employer of SA Express in about 2011.
He just left.
Resigned to join another company.
And we are happy that he just left without correcting this. As a company, what did you do? Because at the end, it is your responsibility as a company.
Sure.
I understand that individual did this mess, but he did it in the name of that is the company.
Absolutely.
And what did you then do?
So
did you just allow him to leave and say it's fine? He left the company.
Clearly, that must have been what happened in that year. And what we've done is revised our processes to ensure that we confirm balances with all the lessors every year.
No, I'm still talking about that individual because he has cost us a lot of money. And we need to recover that money.
There's been no loss of money. What it was the recognition of the opening reserves. No, there's been no outflow of funds. Any events that have happened that we are entitled to receive refunds from the lessor for maintenance events that have been done has been received.
No, that's fine. You see, last week I said to a colleague from SAA, please be mindful that you are under oath. And secondly, the proceedings are on record. And if you mislead Parliament, because what we are going to do, we'll go back and follow that is your responses. Because our idea is to improve the situation at SA Express. And when we discover that some of the responses that we are giving us, particularly financial, that has got financial implications, unfortunately would have to come very hard on you. Please make sure that you are honest, and if you don't understand what I'm saying, you do have a right, that is to request that I clarify the issue, rather than just responding. Because when I come back, it won't be nice. Okay. Let's go to the same sundry income on page 98 on your annual report, note 32. It shows that depreciation for leased assets was incorrect. Although this was corrected, why did it happen?
We corrected it. It was found as part of the audit process. There'd been a miscalculation on the depreciation rates on leasehold improvements to leased aircraft. Again, we've looked at why it happened and what we can do to improve it to make sure that it is not an audit issue and that we are on top of it from the onset.
I think we acknowledge that they were corrected. But my question is, initially, why did it happen?
It's timing issues between when items are capitalized and when the calculation of the depreciation is done, and due to the delays in the processing of when the capitalization happened, we got it incorrect. So there's now a process which we look to speed up and ensure that when the aircraft maintenance is done that is capitalized to the value of the asset, that we make sure that the depreciation is calculated correctly.
Let's look at the same document on page 91, the annual report, about the accrual of the leaves. The Auditor General says accrued leave pay on trade, that is payables, of 14.5 million for 2016. What is this amount for, and why is SA Express that is owing on leave?
In terms of the accounting standards, at any given month and at year end, you have to account for what your potential liability would be to employees for leave that they haven't taken. So if you've entitled to 20 days leave and as at the 31st of March, you haven't taken that leave, we have to make sure that we've provided for that expense so that our liabilities are correct. Because you're entitled to the leave, you haven't taken it, so we have to make sure that it's provided for.
Is that your policy?
Yes.
Let's quickly go to the spreadsheet. I take it that the person who prepared the spreadsheet is amongst the delegation.
Yes, sir, he is.
He is part of. Let's look at the first one, so that we sing from the same hymn book.
The spreadsheet is very unfriendly to
The list of fruitless and wasteful expenditure for the year 2015-26, the revision 2017-08-28. That's how it is titled. Are we there? Before I talk about what is contained there in terms of finances, there's one area that I want us to look at, because it seems to have implications in almost everything. Now, hence, I want us to clarify that first one. Let's zoom into your last column. Action taken, status. Let's read the first one, because it applies to everything. My question is, was this maliciously done? Because you cannot have one answer that is for all these questions. Because I will be dealing with item by item, and I would need a response that is on the item, not a general that is response. Hence, I'm saying let's deal with the first one so that we clarify that.
The reality of our cash flow position during this period was that there were certain creditors that we did not have the ability to pay on time, and those creditors then levy interest and or penalties and or both. Now, just to give context in terms of timing, the guarantee was awarded in 2015. We went through a process to award the loan. That was a very long process. We finally got access to cash from RMB, who was the bank that was awarded based on the tender in November 2016. In the period under review, had the loan funding flowed earlier, we would have paid interest to RMB, or whichever bank it was, and we would have paid the creditors. There would have been no interest payable to the creditor. The interest would have been payable to RMB. However, because the funding was delayed due to process and due diligence by the banks, we didn't have access to the cash, and we had to manage cash flow in the best way that we had, and that inevitably led to delays. So there's one root cause, and that's liquidity.
How much are we talking about here?
The guarantee was initially for 567 million. We then got to the next year. It was reduced by 100 million to 467 million, and we ultimately ended up getting 346 million in November 2016. Of that 346 million, we repaid 58 million in March, in February, hence the request to extend the loan beyond the 3 years.
You mean without that guarantee, you couldn't do anything, even to pay for SARS?
There were a number of creditors that we had to...
No, I'm referring to SARS.
No,
Just respond to my question.
At that point,
because you owed SARS.
Yes, we didn't
And
have,
if you look at the amount of money that is stated there, and what you just indicated as the guarantee, you're talking about a huge amount of money.
Yes.
And what you owed SARS, it's a drop that is in the ocean. Hence, I'm saying, you did not do anything, you're just waiting for this guarantee.
we would pay as and when funds were available. It was not that we sit there and do nothing. It is managing the cash flow on a daily basis to ensure that operations continue.
Okay. Were you directly involved in this?
The whole EXCO team was involved.
It has never happened anywhere. I'm talking about an individual who was supposed to process this. Are you saying your EXCO is so, hands-on, that they are the ones who are doing all these transactions? There is an individual that is doing that on behalf of EXCO. Now, I'm saying, who's this individual?
The transactions were processed. However, due to the limited liquidity that the airline had, there would be a process which would involve everybody to ensure that operations continue. So returns were filed, but the payments were not made.
CEO,
We did
can
not
you
have
help
the
me
cash.
here? Maybe my English, because it's second language to me, it's not that good. I'm saying, who's this individual? For instance, when we are a team here, but it is Sakike Kana who's asking questions. It is not SCOPA that is asking questions. It would be easy for anybody to identify Saki as somebody who said 1, 2, 3. Now that's my question. You cannot respond and say it is the whole of EXCO. EXCO delegated an individual. I'm talking about that individual. Or EXCO members all had pens at the same time and they were writing at the same time. Are you trying to say that to me?
I'm trying to explain the process. So the process would be, this is who has to be paid, this is the cash that's available, and EXCO would go through that process and the CEO would say, this is who we pay and this is when we paid.
CEO, can you, okay, maybe the TM would assist.
CFO, the nub of the question, are you the individual in question who was responsible for that activity at the time?
No.
It's very simple. Then who was responsible?
All right. Okay, before you respond, I thought the chairperson wants, do you want to respond? No, you didn't. Well, actually, you should. Because what I'm understanding that gentleman to be saying was that EXCO had taken the responsibility to make the day-to-day decision on who must be prioritized, who can be paid and who should not be paid. So that even if he holds the pen, but he must get the okay from the executive that you can pay SARS, you can pay so-and-so, you can pay so-and-so.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I think as the CFO was indicating, the issue of the liquidity and why we had to get into a process which is a collective process from an executive committee point of view was the fact that when you see some of the problems that we've had in the business and which unfortunately you find individual junior managers getting involved in signing contracts, in doing payments, we had to make sure that we have a process which would allow that centralized process that we've introduced in terms of the policy. So now when the new acting CEO came into place, Honorable Chair, we took a view that we don't want creditors in the business to be prejudiced, where one individual is making decisions on his own. So we wanted a collective process, and that collective process would have meant that you have a team where finance would prepare a payment schedule of all the creditors that we have in the business and look at the cash flow that's available at that point in time. Now you have an executive team together with the CEO taking collective responsibility. In the ordinary course of business, what would have happened is that payments would be done through a process that's done by finance, but it then goes to the CEO for only the CEO to be the person who signs and authorizes those payments. We wanted to make sure that there is a collective responsibility because we picked up that some of the things that are happening in the business are of such a nature that it became a concern for us as a board to have individuals being the only people who are allowed to authorize payments, Chair.
Okay, Deputy Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson. Honorable Kekana's question has not yet been answered. The nub of the question is, who was responsible at that particular time? The Chief Financial Officer said that he was not responsible. But amongst the gentlemen that are here, the Chief Financial Officer should have institutional memory as to who was the individual that signed off. That's the issue. I hear the explanation tendered by the present chairperson as to how we move forward. But the basis of the question refers to a particular time. Who was the individual responsible, individual or collective of individuals responsible? That should be answered.
So the CEO would sign off those payments. So he would make the decision, yes, it goes, no, it doesn't go, based on the liquidity available to the entity.
Let me not pursue this because unfortunately I am not getting an answer. But let's go to the same spreadsheet. Now that you have a guarantee, you paid, that is your creditors.
There's a large number that have been paid. However, we still have liquidity issues, and we still have issues of late payments.
And they varied from 2 days, 30 days, and all that.
That's correct.
Now, can you explain that to me? How? Because here's the guarantee. You said the reason why you could not pay was for you to wait for the guarantee. Now, here's a guarantee, a chunk of money, and now you are able, that is to pay whoever you owe. Now, why there are discrepancies in terms of dates? Because obviously, now that you've got money, you can pay all those creditors that is in 1 day. Logic dictates that.
In terms of the guarantee conditions, we could not make a single payment, one payment to all creditors on 1 day. We had to supply a list of who was going to be paid when and what the quantity was. That would be sent through to the shareholder, International Treasury, for noting. The guarantee was also it was very specific in that it was to cover long outstanding creditors, and the quantum being 346 million off what we originally required as 567 million wasn't sufficient to cover the amount of creditors that had built up over time. So again, we settled a large portion of that, and then we had to deal with creditors that are linked directly to availability of aircraft. So in order to prioritize operations to get as many of our own aircraft operational, those creditors were paid.
Okay. Now, you are saying, as an example, a creditor like SARS, let's use SARS as an example, and you look at SAA, fuel, that was paid after 30 days, and that one was paid after 7 days. Which one was linked to the aircraft between the two?
Okay. SAA's fuel, if I can just explain the process. SAA procures fuel on behalf of SA Express. Their credit terms have been shortened. We settle SAA on 30 days, and they charge us interest.
Between these two, which one was linked to the aircraft? The SARS or the fuel?
Yeah, we don't pay fuel. SAA deducts the fuel from our revenue, but fuel is linked to aircraft.
But deducting is payment at the end, because that money that we are referring to, it is in your kitty. And if somebody pays you, that is an amount, and you owe that person a particular amount, and he deducts that,
yes,
that amounts to the same thing that we are talking about.
Correct.
It's payment.
Correct.
It's just that it is done differently.
Set off, correct.
That's the question that I'm asking. Chair, let's move to, I think this one is simple. Trade and other receivables. The AG says the entity did not consider the recovery of the maintenance reserve receivables as required by international accounting standards. It is on page 68 of the annual report. Why were accounting standards not followed?
Accounting standards were followed. There was a detailed exercise which assessed the recoverability based on what we believe is predictive future maintenance. There is, however, always a level of estimation, and that's disclosed in the accounting policy in the financials, which states that there's a level of estimation on certain assets and liabilities. It's normal in any business. It is in terms of IFRS. And we believe that those assets are recoverable. We had the evidence to prove we had done the assessment.
Was that evidence provided to the AG?
It was, but there were a number of issues that were dealt with. As I say, the maintenance reserve issue was finally resolved this year. So the maintenance reserves was a key issue. The evidence was provided.
Yes. Was the AG satisfied with that evidence?
Well, clearly from their report they weren't.
Yes.
But we believe as management that we had done everything that was necessary to prove our value, otherwise we would have adjusted for it.
But let's go back a bit so that we understand each other. During the audit process, you normally meet, that is with a team from the AG, and you narrow down, that is all these issues. Is that correct?
Correct.
Come again?
That's correct.
And AG obviously would come up with a finding, you would clarify that, so that AG finally, when he comes up with a final report, he takes that into consideration. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But in this case, was there still a dispute after you have clarified those issues?
There was.
And these are some of the issues that you sent to KPMG?
No, this was not what was sent to KPMG. What was sent to KPMG was our maintenance reserves and asset, and this was done not at the point of the audit, it was done prior to the commencement of the audit.
Now, what is your attitude on this audit finding? Are you still disputing it? Because according to you, you are still not satisfied, and I've just explained the process, and we have agreed that is to that process. That you met with the representatives from the AG, you looked at these issues, you clarified the issues, but still the AG made a finding that is against you.
Correct.
Was the AG wrong?
We believe so.
Chair, Honorable Chair.